let's say I wanted a free A rank, which is like for other gacha games, it's like the normal units. Like you get these in like 10 pulls, pretty much. The game allows you to look through an entire list of A rank units, select the one you want, and about 10 to 20 pulls or so, you get that unit. Hello everyone, and welcome to the Autumn Colors Podcast Solo Edition. I'm your host, the Sozo-sha, and today we are going to be talking about Punishing Gray Raven, the mobile game that's more or less underrated from Kuro Games, the creator of what many people, I assume, nowadays would know them for, and that is Wuthering Waves. So yeah, I can't say that this was a game that I was fully aware of when I started playing it, because I got recommended to this actually not that long ago. It was about 2 years ago now, I think. But since pretty much since I came across it, it quickly became a game that I genuinely loved, and it nowadays became a game that I more so honestly see as should be an example for a lot of gacha games of this caliber and whatnot going forward. And to a degree, I think we have been getting that, but to a number of other degrees, I also think we have not. But yeah. But it is absolutely, I mean, for a mobile game, this is absolutely one of the funnest mobile gacha games I have ever played, just period. And there's a lot, I think, to talk about it. One of which being the elephant in the room, and that being how I hear little to no one actually talking about it. Like, I follow a fair deal of like gacha content creators and everything, and so many of them are focused on Honkai Star Rails, Endless Zone Zero, Genshin Impact, Wuthering Waves, Infinity Nikki, so on and so forth. But this game, as far as I've seen, like, just it'll get coverage, it'll get attention, but it rarely, I feel, gets the attention that it really should deserve. And with this podcast, I hopefully hope to be able to break down essentially why I personally love it, why I had all these great experiences with the game, in the hopes that maybe, quite possibly, if you are interested, because, again, the game is still going on to this day, and if you want to check it out for yourself, it is available on mobile, but it is also available for PC, which they got to that recently. But, yeah, I would absolutely, definitely recommend it right off the bat, and compared to something like, you know, Hoyoverse games, and I'm gonna explain why here. So, and speaking of Hoyoverse games, I should definitely talk about how I got into this. So, it's no secret, right? If you saw my previous episode, or if you've at least heard me talk about this, yeah, it's no secret, but Genshin Impact was a big game for a couple of years with me, to the point where I saw it turn into what it is nowadays, and I left. Yeah. And I had mentioned this back when I was using it, back when I was on Twitter. I had mentioned that more so I was kind of sick and tired of sort of Genshin Impact and Hoyoverse and everything, and I just kind of wanted to move on to other stuff. And I was expecting, you know, the usual crowd of people in the community who just hate who hate anybody that says anything negative about Genshin Impact or any Hoyoverse games, and just to berate me, essentially. I expected that. What I didn't expect is somebody to look at that and go, hey, if you actually, you know, aren't, you know, invested too much in this gacha game, here's a game I feel that actually does a lot more of what you're looking for and a lot more of what you are seeking return in regards to kind of a game like this. And I checked it out, like, because here's the thing, right? I heard this information off of Twitter from somebody on the internet, and it's just like I take all that information with a grain of salt. And so I was like, before I even started downloading it, I looked into the game. I was like, all right, YouTube videos, let's see it. And I looked at some of the content, I looked at some of the gameplay, and it was just like, this took me aback. Like, it's just gameplay this high speed, but at the same time also just, it looks so much fun. It looked like so much fun. And then I was like, you know what I want to do? I want to actually check it out for myself. So I installed it on to my phone, and yeah, this game just, the tutorial level alone was just like, this actually was something I wanted to genuinely play. This was something that I wanted to get into. This was something that immediately hooked me just by the tutorial level alone. I didn't know shit at all about the actual story or the characters or anything before this. But this gameplay and everything, it was just enough. And then it just kept getting better and better from that, and I had been loving it. And even to this day, I still come back to play it because it's just so enjoyable. And the more I look at Punching Gray Raven, the more I just look back at all these other gacha games, right? I look at them and go, these, like, what Kuro Games has done with Punching Gray Raven, a lot of other companies who make these games could really benefit from having that same mentality or that same mindset when it comes to the game. For instance, this is probably gonna be like a genuine, like, sign me up right now moment for people, but the game, whether or not you are new to it, or whether or not you just return for like a new patch or, you know, whatever, right? Occasionally for new patches, they will just ceremoniously just give out a free 5-star, a free top tier unit. Not a 5-star, a top tier unit, like an S rank unit. Because units like the normal units are like A ranks, the top tier units are S ranks, so they'll give you like a free S rank unit out of a lineup. So I think that's really good. Like it's not like, you know, it's not like, oh, it's how do I describe it? Maybe I should start with this. It's not like you need to have a certain allotted amount of pulls or anything on this game to get a free character. Not really, no. You just need to play through the game somewhat, and they give you just a voucher for a free 5-star character out of a lineup, which, yeah, a lot of the characters that are available, pretty much every character that's available to a degree, are genuinely, like, really fun and they're enjoyable to have. Like, sure, yeah, you're going to have your people who are biased. You're going to have people who go like, oh man, you shouldn't get this character, get this character. But genuinely, as someone who pretty much has almost every, like, S rank character that you could get on a voucher, no, a lot of them, to pretty much every single one of those characters have such fun gameplay, major strengths, some weaknesses, so on and so forth. And yeah, there's like recommendations on, they even have this like a system where it's like, here's a recommendation on what to put on this character, or here's a recommendation on what to run with this character. Like, here's a recommendation of the units and whatnot. And that's cool, but you know, you put these characters, right? You put these different characters on teams with whatever you got, and regardless, it can just be fun. It can just genuinely just be some fun. Mindless fun in a lot of ways, but still fun. It's just, in a lot of ways, it is impressive. Just, in my eyes, I would say how they were able to combat, even with Punching Gray Raven, able to combat something like power creep. Now, I won't say that Punching Gray Raven has no power creep, and that's a note I think some people are actually going off of regarding Wuthering Waves, is that, oh well, like, Wuthering Waves has no power creep, and I don't think that's accurate, because I do think that these games do, like, games with combat like this and whatnot, I think all these games do have power creep. It's not a matter of, like, whether or not a game does or doesn't, as much as it is how do you actually deal with it going forward. and how Punching Gray Raven has done it going forward is, well, for one, I think one of the biggest examples, the most popular examples of power creep, right? In my eyes. It's not even like a quote-unquote gacha game. It's a trading card game. Yu-Gi-Oh! Like, Yu-Gi-Oh! Has so much power creep. Like, the game genuinely has not been fun in so many years. I'm not even kidding. Because, mind you, this is coming from somebody who grew up with Yu-Gi-Oh! Most of his childhood. I've seen the show go from a few fusion cards to Exodia, to, like, Egyptian god cards and so on, to we're going to, like, full fusion cards and everything, and polymerization being the new hotness, to synchro summoning, to XYZ summoning, to link summoning, to pendulum summoning now, which in a few years I imagine we're going to come up with a brand new kind of mechanic or gimmick or whatever to actually power creep the game again. I can 100% imagine that. But the big thing when it comes to power creep, when it came to Yu-Gi-Oh, is that in order for, like, the game to still be relevant but also differentiate, like, the new generation from the previous generation, they have gone out of their way to add in new gimmicks, new mechanics, and new kinds of monsters, spells, so on and so forth, that are suited for specific kinds of, again, gimmicks and mechanics. And, you know, like, just new gimmicks and mechanics, sure, that's just something, it exists and everything, but how do you get people to actually want to go for, oh, I need the new deck, I need these new monsters, I need these new characters, which has led them to breaking the game with every new deck, every new monster, so on and so forth, that is intended for, you know, just intended, one, for marketing purposes, but also, two, intended to break the game, intended to just make these cards and make these games incredibly, like, I think the word I'm looking for is, like, immovable objects. Like, they just constantly stay on the field, they constantly don't have to take any damage or anything. And at the same time, it's just, like, a part of that, I feel, is what has made the game so unfun. It's what's made the game so unplayable, it's so boring. It's just that there are so many people now who will go out of their way to run decks where they take somewhere between 10 minutes to 10 days to actually get finished with a fucking turn. And then by the time you get a chance to do your turn, you can't do anything at all. You can do jack shit. And some people can look at that and I'm like, skill issue. I'm like, is it really a skill issue? Or is it just power creep? You know? Like, when you're capable of just curb stomping everything regardless of what stands in your way in a game like this, it's just like, at that point, is skill in any way, shape, or form relevant? I doubt it. And cut back to what I was talking about, how Punching Gray Raven combated power creep. This game has a great understanding of, like, where to utilize certain systems it has, to me, and also understand where to sort of, like, draw the line or leave certain things out. Because, for instance, right, this game has a typing system, and I don't necessarily mean, like, elements. I mean, like, actual, like, units. Like, you have DPS units, you have tank units, you have support units, which is cool. That's fine. You know, a number of games come with those systems as well. But this game has involved different modes and even different opponents that, if you combat against them, the game recommends, hey, we recommend you run it at this level of strength with your team, but also this enemy is resistant to this typing. This enemy is resistant to this class. This enemy is resistant to all these other units except for this unit. And in one way, I guess you could say that last one is power creep, but at the same time, it's just like, it's resistant, but it doesn't mean that it's completely and utterly completable, unplayable. It just means that, hey, you can still go in it with whatever the hell you want, but you're going to find that this game might be a little more... This game mode might be a little more easier, or maybe even a little more beneficial to you if you just go with, like, sort of these recommendations. Like, they'll have certain boss enemies where they'll go, alright, so this enemy resists fire damage. However, he's weak to ice damage. So you build a team of ice units and, you know, it helps get the enemy down quicker, but it doesn't necessarily... Here's the thing, it gets the enemy down quicker, but it doesn't necessarily ultimately guarantee that this team was just ultimately going to be stronger, or that this team is just going to be the optimal meta to go with. I think I've made a stream talking about this, but I think I've gone on record, and I could probably bring it up by saying that it doesn't necessarily matter what characters you run. You know, some characters objectively are better than other characters, sure. But this game, like, it doesn't matter what characters you run. You can run the characters this game gives you on the tutorial, build them up, and you would still be kicking ass. That's a big part of the beauty of what I love about this game, is that they've taken, like, difficulty and geared it towards two things. How tough are the units that you have been building, okay? And the second one, of course, is how well can you dodge? Those are the two big factors that come to mind when I think about, like, just this difficulties game, because here's the thing, unlike certain other, you know, gacha games or whatnot, when the big thing around this game is two things. Making sure your units are built, and also being able to fucking dodge. Those are, like, the two biggest things. Sure, yeah, like, characters will have certain movesets, characters will have certain things to go on with them in battle, where it's like you can pay attention to that stuff, and you could probably change up the gameplay a little more for you, but none of that actually matters unless you dodge, which this game is not only fully aware of, and it allows you to do, but it encourages in a lot of ways. One of which, for instance, being the the added benefit of dodging, where if you dodge an enemy at the right moment, you slow down time for everything, and you get to do extra damage in this little field for about 5 to 7 seconds. It's not a whole lot of time, but when you actually take a look at this gameplay, those 5 to 7 seconds can go actually a long way. It's interesting, and I really enjoy it. Now, when it comes to the actual, like, combat itself, it's to me, I look at this and it's very, like, Devil May Cry-ish. Right? It's like the closest I feel that it has gone to emulating the style of Devil May Cry, but... And there's also a whole thing of, like, it's, like, with the way it's played, it can be seen as a button masher, which it can absolutely be played like that, but the way I've seen this gameplay, the combat, I think, to quote the Russian Badger on Doom Eternal, essentially, at the beginning of playing the game, my style was just ham-fisted, crude, it was just button mashing, but by paying attention to my characters, building my characters, paying attention to what each individual character is capable of doing in these little touches and details, I was able to transform that gameplay into something efficient and something chaotic and something, although, again, endlessly, like, button mashing and whatnot, fun. Enjoyable. And again, to quote Russian Badger, it felt like going from banging my fists on a piano to putting my fingers on the keys to produce something that somewhat resembled sound. And that's how I feel about Punishing Gray Raven, is that the gameplay feels like, in the eyes of the player, I feel like the gameplay develops alongside you. Because, yes, button mashing, it can be fun, but there's always that thing where it's like, you know in the back of your head at some point, this is going to get boring. And eventually, like, games that just rely on button mashing just go, okay, it's button mashing. Yeah. And then eventually it just gets incredibly boring to the point where you don't even want to pick it up anymore. with games like Punishing Gray Raven, it goes from button mashing to eventually go, okay, I've done quite a bit of button mashing. Is there like a formula, or are there movesets for how these characters work? And you look into them, you train with them, and you realize that, yeah, there are like specific movesets for these characters. There are certain moves and certain tricks that you can do to actually deal more damage with your characters, or get the most bang for your buck. It's like before everything else, it really shows you that like Kuro Games really did want to put their all into the gameplay and the combat. Because yeah, it could have been just so simple to be like, oh man, just fighting like an anime character, this is so cool. But no, they actually put genuine time and energy into building these characters. And not just building these characters in ways that differentiate one another from being all the same. For instance, one of the biggest characters like they keep bringing back is Lucia. Lucia is the tutorial character you start out with, but there's also different models and different versions, and models and versions that are either of the similar character or in a different fashion all have these different movesets, all have these different skills. Like, and at a point where it's like you could put like 3 Lucias on a team, I guarantee you the way you play them can end up being vastly different one after the other compared to certain other games where it's just like they have all these different characters, but, and yeah, they have cool animations, but they don't really go out of their way to really differentiate one character from the other in terms of playstyle. Not really. Maybe some, like, bare minimum levels of differentiating, but that's kind of it. Where Punishing Gray Raven, no, like, the little details, the nitty-gritty, that is where some of their game design and some of the gameplay actually flourishes, to me. To the point where it's like, if you get enough characters and you play with them enough times, you start to understand their actual patterns. You start to understand what takes to, you know, get the most bang for your buck, to the point where when you're playing some of those bench pressing modes, because this game has bench pressing modes, this game has a mode where it's just like it's survival mode, fight till the end of the timer and whatnot, and the game also has, yeah, we're going to put you against high level bosses and whatnot, but we're also going to divide them between difficulty, and the higher you go across in this one boss's difficulty, the harder this game gets. They have modes like that. And when you actually learn how to truly play your characters, when you learn how to use like team coordination and understanding, you know, systems like its ping system, where it's like you get 3 orbs in a row and you get to like tag in a new unit and whatnot. When you really start to get into that, when you really start to understand how all that works, your mind starts going from it being a button masher to, like I said, something where you put your fingers on the keys of a piano to produce something that resembled sound. Now it's going from, oh man, I'm just like pressing buttons on a screen, or I'm pressing buttons on a controller. This is really cool, to like understanding where exactly like these certain units lie and being able to play to their strengths, and also trying to analyze when the enemy is going to be attacking or when the enemy is going to be open. Like, it's interesting. Like, it's just a high-paced combat, but at the same time, it's not so fast that it overstimulates you as much as it's fast enough to where you don't understand what's going on at first, but the more you stick with it, the more you play it, the more it starts to become muscle memory, and the more you actually start to like actually get what's going on, and the more it just like it starts again making sense, and you start changing how you play. That's a big part of what I think is one of like, especially with the gameplay, is Punishing Gray Raven's biggest strength. It is that essentially, like in some games where they have sunk cost fallacy, this game just has, it just feels like it rewards you for actual, like, how much time you put into it. how much time you spent with these characters, how much time you spent getting to know the systems. It really feels like it rewards you for that, in my eyes. And regarding the power creep, I mean, we could take a game like, say, I mean, one game that's a big conversation right now for power creep is Honkai Star Rail, right? And in my eyes, right, when it comes to punishing Grey Raven, the reason why I feel like they were able to combat power creep was that they built a lot of these difficult modes and they built a lot of these challenges around them being challenged. Like, they take what you can do on a base level and go, okay, this is what you can't do. Like, sometimes they'll have certain modes. Like, there was one year I remember playing a mode where you face it off against an opponent. However, it doesn't matter how much health you got. It doesn't matter how much damage you can do. If the opponent attacks you once, you die immediately. Doesn't matter. You could have the most broken unit in the game at that point in time, but if they get hit, oh, no. They're gone. They're done. They're gone. And that mindset, I feel, genuinely is what helps this game from encroaching on power creep territory. Or rather, in some cases, actually giving into it. Actually, like, making modes that genuinely challenge the player, regardless of character, regardless of builds. Just challenging the player to beat it. And some other gacha games just, you know, they have all these new characters, all these new weapons, so on and so forth, and they want, you know, they want you to be able to actually, you know, roll for them. They want you to acquire them. And they want those characters to feel like, in some way, shape, or form, like there's a reason why you should get them outside of, oh, they're hot, or oh, this is badass. And that's where I feel they shoot themselves in the foot, is that a lot of these games, like, they make new content, they make new modes and whatnot, specifically to keep in mind for new characters and all that. And so, like, all those characters that you were playing, say, several months ago, that were the epitome of, oh man, these are some top-tier characters. Now, they're just thrown to the wayside, and now a lot of those modes are hard, and now a lot of those modes are difficult. But the game's almost like, yeah, if you had this character, it could absolutely be a lot more easier for you. With Punishing Grey Raven, I've never really come across that too much. Technically I have, but in the very loose sense. Like, I mentioned an enemy where it's like, oh yeah, this enemy, they resist all these other units except this one specific unit. Yeah, that unit in particular is not like, as far as I recall, it's just, the unit I believe is called Rosetta, and as far as I recall, I don't think she's like necessarily like a top tier unit or anything. I think she's like just a normal A rank, which, oh, I haven't even mentioned this, I don't think. This game's gacha system is so wonderful. I know that's hard to, I know it's gonna be hard to explain, you know, coming from a genre that is hell-bent on trying to get your time and money. Let me explain. Let's say in a normal gacha game, right? There's a few different systems they have in play. You can, you know, roll for like a character or a weapon, right? And you might have a chance of getting like a 50-50 and having to only go for specific weapons, right? In a lottery system where you have to like save up all these different pulls and so on and so forth in the hopes of getting that character or that weapon. In the hopes, but never guaranteed. Some games go out of their way to, anytime you get like a free top tier unit or top tier weapon, right? Some games will go out of their way to just like, they won't do a whole thing where it's like 50-50, where if you don't get it this time, you get it next time. No, some games will absolutely go out of their way to just essentially lottery gate it until you finally can manage to get it. Some games are like that. Other games, you know, they have some choices here and there, but overall it's like, let's say you want like a top tier character, however, or hell, maybe you want even like a recent character, like a limited time recent character. Like let's say this is a lower tier character, like in terms of like a 4-star or an A rank, right? Well, that unit is only available for a limited time on the banner, and if you don't actually go for that banner, well, then that character is going to be gone until they get rerun. Which is a result of FOMO. Which, to those who don't know, the FOMO stands for the fear of missing out, which is a big part of what gacha games are susceptible for, is that they have like these different modes, these different banners, so on and so forth, where they are limited time, and if you don't get there in time, if you don't get the characters, if you don't get the content in time, well, then you're just going to have to wait till whenever the company decides to actually release them again, rerun them. And, you know, if you stick with a game since day one and you stick with it like it's an addiction, probably it's no problem for you. But for everyone else, yeah, that sucks. This is where I feel, for the most part, Punishing Gray Raven actually, like a lot of these systems, Punishing Gray Raven kind of combats. Because, let's say I wanted a free A rank, which is like for other gacha games, it's like the normal units. Like you get these in like 10 pulls, pretty much. The game allows you to look through an entire list of A rank units, select the one you want, and about 10 to 20 pulls or so, you get that unit. Now, imagine someone's first actual experience on Punishing Gray Raven have all these different experiences going through like the gameplay and all that, and accumulates all of this currency for pulling. And then looks through like the roster and the catalog of different characters to collect. They pick one, and then they just keep rolling and rolling and rolling. And if I recall correctly to my memory, after about 60 pulls or so, this game will give you a free S-rank unit. Or, not a free S-rank unit, but the game will give you an S-rank unit. Yeah, you don't have to roll to get a free S-rank unit. The game will just kind of, at points, will give you them. Which I think is great, honestly. But I think that really goes to show just, like, in my eyes, just what I love about, like, just this game's essential, like, gacha system, where if you want to go for a specific character, if you want to go for a specific weapon, right, you can go for that. Now, granted, yes, you can't really do it with 6 stars, but for the most part, in my eyes, I kind of like that, because, I mean, for one, if there's a limited time unit, that's what you're going to be going for anyway. But regarding 6 stars, I mean, like, are you really going to spend all this time, like, just going for specific 6 stars and whatnot? Or when the game gives you, like, a new character, are you just going to be like, oh, wow, new character, let's see how they work, let's try and build them, and maybe they'll be pretty good. I have a bunch of different, like, A-rank units on my account, and many times over, I find myself using them a lot more than the S-rank units. Not to say that I don't use the S-rank units, but the A-rank units, with how this game utilizes its combat and everything, the A-rank units can be quite a bit of fun. All things considered, yeah. And this game doesn't just have, like, free units or free weapons. It also has, like, free... I believe they're called Cubs. Like, CUB. It's an acronym. I forget what exactly it stands for, but there's these, like, these little like plushies or whatever that stick around with you, and they actually add like they tack on like more damage or help you out in some ways regarding characters. Now, that's not necessary until late game rent, but if you wanted those kinds of units, right? If you wanted those kinds of like plushies, the game is like, yeah, just select the one you want, and then you get in 10 pulls. And before they started, basically, I think, compiling, because I believe they had, before, I remember them naming the units constructs and then uniframes. Uniframes were like specific units that do so much damage, but the modes that they're actually in, like, nerf their damage output quite a bit. It's a bit of like a handicap in a bit of a way. But yeah, they're like special kinds of units that have like all these different cool tricks and abilities that other constructs and whatnot can't have. They've kind of walked that back because constructs now I think are just called omniframes. But if you wanted a uniframe, right? If you wanted one of those powerful characters, again, they have a permanent banner where you can just select all these different uniframes, and you'll get it in like 10 wishes, in 10 rolls, in 10 pulls, 10 whatever the fuck you want to call it. But yeah, like, that to me I feel is genuinely a lot more satisfying to deal with as opposed to other games' gacha systems. I think one of the most egregious systems in my eyes to this day is between Fate Go and Nexon's, which enough said there. Yeah. So those who don't know, Fate Go is pretty infamous for having some egregious summons for specific characters and whatnot. And Nexon, those games are fucking rigged, like even more so than normal. They're absolutely, it's just, it's really predatory. It's really disgusting. But moving on to that. But I mean, like, across the board, I mean, the gacha system they have is honestly pretty satisfying. It's, yeah, again, like, even regarding, like, weapons, I think what's really interesting is that they do add, like, hey, we have all these different characters. They have all of them, or for the most part, a lot of them have their, fall under certain weapons, but then you'll have characters who utilize specific weapons that are unique to them. And what I do like about it is that they have like their top tier weapon that you should roll for and everything, but they also have one that is suited for the character or even characters similar to them. If you just want to like roll for that in like 10 pulls, and you'll probably end up getting it. That's another thing I like too, is that like across the board, rolling for characters and weapons and certain gadgets and whatnot have this satisfaction to it that, yeah, sure, maybe I'll take a break from punching Grey Raven every now and then, right? But I will still find myself coming back because I love the way this game handles systems, the way this game handles grinding and farming, the way this game, I mean, okay, grinding and farming, to be fair, it is on the same level of like mobile game grinding and farming, where it does time gate you and there's not really a whole lot else to do. But in my experience, especially nowadays, yeah, that time, like, just playing through like the different modes and whatnot can just genuinely be fun. Hell, I don't even have to do that. If I just want to like just collect the resources and go, if I've already beaten certain farming modes, I can just auto clear it and I get the resources that way. Of course, yeah, you do that too many times, it gets boring. That's why I like to every now and then just use new characters and whatnot and just go to town. But yeah, it's just like, I genuinely have been like, over the years, I've been loving playing the game. And it shows because, I started getting into this game, I think about, like, a month or so. After more or less I kind of decided to take a break from Genshin Impact. And then going into October of that same year, I believe, that's when I was quitting. Meanwhile, I was still playing, like, Punishing Gray Raven. And, again, like, I quit Genshin Impact over 2 years ago, going on 3 now. 2 years ago, going on 3 now, like, with Punishing Gray Raven, I'm still loving it. I'm still enjoying it. Yeah. Granted, yeah, it's not, you know, full of all... It's not full of, like, content that I think, like, would keep you occupied for, like, hours upon hours on end. Mainly because it's not an open world game. That is reserved for games like Wuthering Waves. But, yeah, for a mobile game where it's just, like, you want to, you know, high-speed action and combat and whatnot, if you want that, like, this game actually goes out of its way to provide that. It does its job as a mobile gacha game. That and also the costumes and the outfits that they give out also being really cool. Yeah. This game also has, like, a lot of different costumes and outfits for characters, and a lot of them have, like, specifically new animations. Some of them have, like, new sound effects and so on and so forth. Some of them I even think have, like, new lines and new animations for, like, characters in Idol. Yeah, it's just the attention to detail is really impressive. Of course, the thing around that is, like, that's ultimately kind of, in my eyes, that is a little FOMO because, yeah, I think a lot of the costumes of past patches have, at this point, if I recall correctly, I would have to go back and look at it, because I haven't played it for a little bit. I've been occupied with Wuthering Waves. I would have to go back and look at it, but if they have added in a patch where, you know, all of the previous outfits that you can't really get anymore for one reason or another are available, I mean, yeah, then I'll just I guess I'll eat my own words. But right now, yeah, there are some outfits that ultimately are just like limited time only and whatnot, but I mean, they're cosmetics, so I don't really put too much stock in them being like, oh man, this is a deal breaker, because this game is fine enough. And not to mention, like, again, like, all of its units feeling so, like, yeah, I don't know, they just, all of them really have this, like, vibe of being, like, unique, despite many of them carrying the same weapons or similar weapons and whatnot, or even being the same fucking character. Like, this game really has a vibe of, like, making different characters feel unique between one another. Like, you have a character running a chainsaw, and there's another version of her that's just using a mecha. Like, what the fuck? It's really impressive. And of course, I can't really talk about, like, this game, as well as its unfortunately limited time events, which, yeah, can't really do anything about that, unfortunately, but that is the collab characters. Now, if I recall correctly, yes, collab characters in gacha games are kind of, are just expected to be limited time content. I believe I know that much. And, yeah, it is very much a case of, like, if you haven't, like, for example, if you're listening to this now and you're thinking, oh, I want to give, like, Punishing Gray Raven a try now, and you're thinking, oh man, I hope I can get, like, 2B, I hope I can get, Black Rock Shooter, I hope I can get... Because, yeah, you can get those, like, you could get those characters if you were a part of the events, but they're gone. And, yeah, it's... Yeah, I don't really know, like, what else to say about that, because I don't really know what to do in regards to that, honestly. But I will say definitely, like, these different characters, these different collab characters coming up, and the game actually going on, like, out of its way to, like, make these different movesets for the characters, more or less, and giving them their own weapons, and even at times giving them their own stories. I haven't even talked about that. Like, the story writing in this actually is honestly kind of... It's actually, as far as gacha games goes, it's actually pretty good. In my eyes. There is, you know, there's... And sometimes I will get the vibe that the dialogue maybe goes on for a little too long, but for the most part, this dialogue actually flows pretty well. And not just that, they also have, like, these, like, character stories. Like, okay, for... As much as I love this game and everything, the one drawback I do think is, like, kind of disappointing is that a lot of these are just, like, a lot of these story moments and whatnot are just, like, specifically for, like, visual novel kind of content. So you're going to have to deal with that. But that said, with the story itself, there's a lot to unpack that I think is genuinely interesting. Like, the whole story around Lucia, even characters like 21, Vera, like, all these other characters, even Nanami, all these characters, like, have their own unique and interesting stories that, with the way they're delivered and handled, I really feel like they are just, like, they're enjoyable to actually learn about and actually follow through. And that's also the thing, too, is that, so the thing about, this game it has, like, you know, it has the base story, and it has some event stories, granted, but it also has stories that are character specific, and you get those character specific stories by, you know, actually acquiring the character. Once you do that, you can actually get some of their stories. I don't know if they are still doing it, but the last time I checked, they were doing it for some other characters and whatnot, and yeah, but even then, I mean, again, let's just, like, the detail that they've placed into it. Like, for example, Lucia Plume actually is an interesting character because the whole thing regarding Lucia is that the original Lucia was being sort of cloned or made into androids or cyborgs, and they were trying to perfect the original because the original essentially abandoned Grey Raven and became an antagonist. I wouldn't necessarily say she's, like, a big villain or anything, but she doesn't really ally herself with the enemies necessarily, as much as she allies herself with her childhood friend. That's kind of the vibe. And so what Grey Ravens decide is we're gonna, like, copy and clone Lucia until basically we can get it right. Then they create Plume. A version, for whatever reason, is different than the other copies, to the point where, ironically, her not being the exact same version of Lucia actually made her incredibly, like, almost like an identical copy of the original, just in a different perspective. Because, yeah, she's different than the other versions of Lucia before her, even the Alpha, but she also, in her own ways, like, she has this personality that feels very much like the original Lucia, but from a different point of view. Like, it's one of those things where it's like, one of those stories where it's like a what if or an alternate universe story, where you see how if things went down a different way, these characters could have been like this. That's kind of what Plume feels like. To the point where there's an actual part of the story where her and the original Lucia, which is called Alpha, her and Alpha actually reconvene, and Plume actually decides to work together with Alpha. Both of them go down sort of the same path, even to the point where both of them are both of them decide to leave their comrades. Like, Alpha decided to leave, you know, Grey Ravens and everything for her own reasons. Plume decided to leave all of them as well, despite not really having much of a reason to actually turn her back on them or anything. Not necessarily. But again, she's not, like, betraying them or anything. But, like, with the way they handle it, it's just, like, the way the story is, it's... I don't know, I think the way they handle it is genuinely, like, interesting. I love what they've done with this. And on top of that, it's just, like... It's not just, like, the own character-specific stories. Like, this game has an affection system, and for, like, actually getting your unit's affection up, you get to see, like, this own little mini-story that they make up for the units in the Commandant, which is the main character. And that also has some details, too, like, tying back to Plume. Like, one of her moments in that actual story between her and the Commandant is... And what I like about this, too, is that it also establishes other characters' connections in story as well. It's just like... It showcases just Plume's gaps of memory or confusion regarding who Lucia originally was. Like, there's a character that is considered to be... considers herself to be, like, Lucia's rival, and that's Cara. And there's, like, a moment in that particular story where Cara wants to fight Lucia. And Plume just says, okay. It takes Cara back because she's so used to Lucia just running away, not wanting anything to do with this. So little moments like that, I think, are, like... I think are really neat. I love that this game actually thinks about that kind of stuff. Now, when it comes to, like, the limited time story events, like, for example, the crossover events, like, for one, the last crossover event I played, which I think was the last crossover event they had, was the Black Rock Shooter one. They took a story that relatively has no actual story to it, because Black Rock Shooter characters are basically just... they're basically just Hatsune Miku-inspired color-themed characters. That's kind of what they are. Their whole origin bases themselves around initially a Hatsune Miku song, and then an artist sort of designing them. And that's kind of it. That's really all that amounted. And then we got an anime out of that, then we got a game out of that, then we got a manga out of that, and then we also got another anime out of that, so on and so forth. And now, Kuro Games collaborates with Punch Grey Raven, and now we have an original story with that it's really interesting to see, like, the correlation between Black Rock Shooter and Punching Grey Raven. I'm pretty sure if anyone were to find it, you could probably see, like, the collab actual event in the story there, but there's, like, they draw several correlations and several parallels to characters such as Black Rock Shooter and Deadmaster, to Lucia, the new version, which is Crimson Weave, and Plume. But yeah, it's just genuinely, I think the story's writing is, honestly, okay, it's not, I don't think it's the best I've ever seen or heard. But I do think that it genuinely, like, as far as gacha games go, this is actually really some really good stuff in how they handle it. Like, this game is not, like, a lot of the times this game is not... It's not a stranger to having its characters get through scuffles, but it's also not a stranger to, like, going down that darker route, going down that darker path regarding its characters. And I know some people are going to say, well, this game also has some dark stories. Yeah, but in comparison to this, how much do those stories actually show instead of telling? That's the big thing. Like, you have details where basically they almost confirm, I think, more or less a lot of the characters just kind of die. Or at the very least, they get to a point where it's just like they're no longer themselves. And it's fucked up. Like, for example, Lucia Plume, like, she's almost close, she's about as closely tied to the original as you could get, but at the same time, the trade-off being is that this version of Lucia actually has a severe case of dementia. And as time goes on, she's susceptible to losing everything about her and all of her memories. And they actually do state that the last thing that she would remember before losing all of her memories and everything was her Commandant, was basically the main character. That was the last thing that was tying her to herself. So, yeah, I think that, like, the way the way this story handles its characters and its story, I think is genuinely, like, some really good stuff, and I don't want to knock Kuro games regarding this. Yeah. But yeah, I would definitely, like, 100% if it isn't clear down. If it hasn't been clear. 100% if I haven't made myself clear. God, I can't talk today. But 100%, if I haven't made myself clear, I definitely would recommend checking out this game. Because there are some comments every now and there's some comments every now and then that I hear about this game. One of which my friend every now and then reminds me of this, which is why I can't forget. Which is why I continue to fail, like, forgetting or dropping it. But yeah, I played this game live at one point, and somebody came into my chat, and they're being kind of stingy about it. It's just, why are you playing a game with no viewers? You're playing a dead game. Just, dude, you shouldn't be playing a dead game, so on and so forth, all that shit. Yada, yada, yada. You should be playing this game, you should be playing that game. Don't play the game with, don't play the game that has 0 viewers. Why are you playing the game with these characters? Why are you playing a game without these, like, limited time characters, even though the events are done? You should be playing a game and have all these limited time characters, so on and so forth. Yeah, all that bullshit. And I feel, honestly, I feel like that does a disservice above all else to a game like this, because genuinely, I don't think it's dead. I don't think it's dead in the slightest. I just think it's not as popular as there are for other games, which I think is a valid criticism. Not even a criticism, it's a valid observation. Yeah, it's a valid observation that this game is not as popular compared to other games nowadays. It really is. Like, this game is, I don't know how many years ago, but at the very least, it is, like, I would say maybe 3-4 years old. That's gone on for a long time, and it's still going. But yeah, like, when you compare it, like, regarding Kuro games, the big title that so many people are going to know them for nowadays is Wuthering Waves, because that's one of the more popular games right now that they've done. So I don't necessarily think that this game is necessarily dead, as much as it's not in the spotlight as much anymore compared to the company's follow-up game, or compared to other games by other companies. And that's the truth. It doesn't make it a dead game. It just makes it a game. It makes it on the same level as the FGC, where, okay, new fighting game comes out, everybody hears about it, and the game is popular for maybe a month or two. And then, like, there's not really a whole too much talk about it, more or less, unless something big happens or a big announcement. And then, more or less, it just... Sorry. But more or less, what I was trying to say is that... Fuck, I forgot my train of thought. But what I was trying to say, is more or less this, Punching Gray Raven is... I think above all accounts, it is one of those games where it's like the FGC, where it's like, yeah, new fighting game comes out, and it stays the course for a couple months, and then it just sort of falls into obscurity, more or less. But that doesn't automatically mean that the game is dead. It does not automatically mean that the game's not getting attention. It just means that the game is not in the public eye as much anymore, and that's kind of doing its own thing. Like, regarding the death of a game only dies when the game itself dies. Like, actually, that's the big thing. I know, big plot twist, right? A game dies when it dies. People die when they're killed. But yeah, like, I mean, there's plenty of games from years ago, even, like, over a decade ago now, that I could bring up that just, they don't exist anymore. For example, how many of y'all are aware of the little gacha game called Gacha Warriors X? That was a game from over a decade ago, and they have shut down production, again, years ago. This was back when I was a kid. They shut that game down years ago. It's no longer in commission. It's no longer available to download anywhere. How many of y'all remember a little game called Minimon Masters? Not Minion Masters. I know, not Minion Masters. Minimon Masters. This was also a gacha game of its sorts, and that closed down, I think, in 2021. Yeah. So yeah, games more or less like when they die, they die. You know, that ultimately is the truth. However, if a game is, you know, not as much in the public eye anymore, but it's still functioning, it's still operating, like you can still play to this day, it's not necessarily as much of a dead game necessarily as much as it is like a game that's, just, again, just a little more like you have to look for the community and whatnot. Now, in some cases, there are games that are both alive and dead. Like some games that where it's just like nobody really wants to play it, but it's still operational. Yeah, those I essentially would call those games circling the drain in its own way, or on life support. Not necessarily dead though. But yeah. With Punch and Gray, I mean, like, okay, so for a second there, let's humor the idea, right, that this game is dead. Why don't we fix that? The game is available on, I believe, Apple. The game is available on Android. The game is available on PC nowadays. And this is my own personal request. If Kuro Games is listening to this, I doubt it. But Kuro Games, could you make this this game and even Wuthering Waves playable on, oh, I don't know, Linux-based systems like the Proton operating system, aka the Steam Deck? This is not me going, well, I want to get this specific, well, I have this specific system, so I need this game to be on there. No. The Steam Deck is, it's just, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not fascinating, it's not revolutionary, it is impressive. I think that's the word I'm looking for. It's an impressive piece of gaming equipment and technology, utilizing a operating system that bases its own functions and whatnot around Linux. And, you know, I feel like more games, whatnot, not even like gacha games, I feel like more games, after getting a Steam Deck, really could actually take into account, like, Linux as a suitable, like, as a suitable operating service to run these games on. And, you know, it's like, it's not to say that every game doesn't run on Linux or anything. By all accounts, am I not saying that? But it is like, there's a catalog of games I will come across or I own that I just can't play on the Steam Deck. Like, I can't play games like Dragon Ball FighterZ or anything because of the anti-cheat. I can't play most games like Wuthering Waves on my Steam Deck because of anti-cheat and whatnot. Which is unfortunate. But a game like this, a game like Punching Gray Raven, I'm just like, this genuinely, I feel, on something like a Steam Deck, I feel could actually be incredibly fun. Genuinely. Now, I know most likely, like, I don't know, maybe the team is still on Punching Gray Raven is still, like, making improvements. Maybe. maybe they're still more than willing to actually like look out for other markets to tap into. And hey, I mean, nowadays, if they want to get their game more like if they want to bring in more customers and whatnot, if they want to bring in more of a player base, hey, Lynx is an untapped market. I would absolutely say, just tap into it. You'd be surprised about how many people would especially nowadays, would actually like pick up the game and play it. But yeah. Oh man. It's I don't know. It's just there's so much to say I have to say about Punishing Gray Raven that I could go more into detail, honestly, but yeah. If there is one thing I do consider when it comes to like Kuro games, and that is sort of like Wuthering Waves' future in a lot of ways. And in my eyes, regarding Wuthering Waves, I'm seeing a lot of the similar kinds of improvements and additions that you could argue with Punishing Gray Raven that it was also doing there. So my thought process is, if Wuthering Waves is going to be improving, like with 2.0, they added in stuff like flight. Like you can actually fly now in the open world. If we're going, like, if they're adding in that stuff, I'm just thinking, if Punishing Gray Raven is anything to look at, possibly a lot of what Punishing Gray Raven was doing with its game as well, we could also see being correlated to Wuthering Waves as well. Like, for example, Wuthering Waves, its bench press mode, like the tower. If you want to, like, challenge, like, certain enemies and whatnot and certain difficulties, like, you have a counter, I think, every week for individual characters and team-ups. Or not team-ups, but teams to actually participate in. And when you run that counter to 0, you can no longer use those characters or that specific team. That, to me, I think is, like, really interesting because it showcases that, yeah, the game wants you to have as many characters as possible, but it also wants you to continue building more than just 3 characters. It does. In some cases, it actually wants you to build more than just 6 characters. But ultimately, it's like, I look at, like, sort of what Punishing Gray Raven does, because, like, again, with that whole, like, tower thing, right? The tower in Wuthering Waves, yeah, that was emulated, that more or less, that system was emulated from Punishing Gray Raven, because that's what PGR did for its system, which is you challenge a boss with a team, and you get X amount of tries with all this team, and after that, you can no longer use those characters this week on these systems. Instead, you gotta move on to using other characters or other teams. And I'm just thinking, it's just like, if there's a number of things I've seen in Punishing Gray Raven that are being showcased and even sort of implemented in Wuthering Waves, right? I'm just thinking, for the future of this game, I imagine more or less, if Punishing Gray Raven is anything to write home about, I 100% imagine a lot of what is being written about Punishing Gray Raven is what Wuthering Waves is going to take notes from and implement. I feel that. Now, do I think that everything that Punishing Gray Raven does is going to be put into Wuthering Waves? No. And in some cases, I would say that's probably for the best. Because these games, relatively, they play on different levels. They play on different genres in a lot of ways. But I think for a lot of the stuff that I personally have enjoyed and liked out of Punishing Gray Raven being put into Wuthering Waves, like, for example, Punishing Gray Raven's gacha system, I think having that added into Wuthering Waves would genuinely be welcoming. And, I know some people, because the way I I explained it wasn't all too clear. Some people are probably thinking about this and going, oh, well, so you want like a system where you can just get any character at all? And, well, one, yeah. I mean, it would help instead of getting constant like copies of specific characters that I already have that I'm not really looking for. It would help make the pulls and whatnot a little more differentiating, and actually get me excited to get all of the characters, or get as many characters as I possibly want, to the point where I almost forgot, all right, I have enough pulls for racked up that I can actually get a free unit. A free top tier unit. But also, like, despite all of that, the game also, like, Punishing Gray Raven also implements a option for random summon, random pull, where depending on, you know, if you get, like, considering your temple, you might get a random character, you might get a random weapon, so on and so forth. And you could just go with that if you're not looking for, like, specific characters or specific weapons and whatnot. You can go for that. But, or maybe it was only the characters. I don't know. But either way, right? If we can get, like, that system in Wuthering Waves, I would genuinely love it. I think that was good. Because they already kind of have it. They have, like, a permanent weapon banner where you can pick the weapon you want to roll for. Like, that's fine. I think that's great. Now, if we had that kind of system implemented for their other, like, permanent character banner, I think that would be cool, too. But yeah, I definitely feel like if we are going to see a number of changes regarding Wuthering Waves, at the very least, its quality of life in a lot of ways regarding its gameplay, specifically in terms of, like, combat, most likely they are probably going to take from what had worked in the past, and that is Punishing Gray Raven. So, if we see anything like, if there's anything to take from this, is like, yeah, if most likely if there's things to sort of look forward to or maybe hope towards what Wuthering Waves does, I would absolutely say check out Punishing Gray Raven and see what it's doing. Above all else, right? Above all of this, I would have to, again, if Kuro Games is listening, right? Or if this actually makes it to their doorstep or whatever, and they hear me, like, more or less actually praising the game and everything, if I could just, one request, and I know most likely this isn't going to happen anytime soon, I'm not saying that, just one request. I would love it if Kuro Games would stop making gacha games. Now, I did not say stop making games. I didn't say that. I said stop making gacha games, because it doesn't matter if it's Punishing Gray Raven or Wuthering Waves, this company produces quality. That's what I've been able to see. I have loved my experience in Wuthering Waves, but I've also loved my experience in Punishing Gray Raven quite a fucking lot. So much so that I'm just looking at this, I'm like, this game would be so much fun if you just had a base pricing, let everything be unlockable, or just downloadable for free. I genuinely think that would honestly be great. I would love that. And that's a big problem I'm noticing a lot with gacha game companies, is that there are people in these industries, in this industry. There are people in this industry, and there are people in these companies. That's what I mean. That want to make something along the lines of a AAA game. They want to make a open world game with immersive gameplay and everything. They want to make a good hack and slash or an action RPG. They want to make this. But they also hide it behind it being a constant live service title with a bunch of these microtransactions and loot box systems and money coin bundles, so on and so forth. And I just feel like if you were to take a step back from that and instead go for essentially what I think, what was it, Xseed? I don't know, the people who did Grand Blue Fantasy, which Grand Blue Fantasy, if I recall correctly, was initially a gacha game. And they more or less kind of took a step back from that and went more into fighting games, because now we have Grand Blue Fantasy Versus and Rising. And a lot of people, for the most part, genuinely love that. They love that these games went down that route. Now, I'm not saying that Kuro Games has to go down the route of fighting games, even though God, could you imagine a fucking Wuthering Waves or Punishing Gray Raven arena fighter? Like, that would be so much fun. But, or hell, even like a fighter like sort of like on the level of Arc Sys, it would be fun. But you know, I'm not saying they have to go down that route, but going down the route of like making, you know, your own Devil May Cry like, your own Souls like, your own Breath of the Wild like, you know, but not having it be a gacha game, I think would genuinely be enjoyable. It would be entertaining. It would probably be a good contender for Game of the Year, if I'm being honest. I know that's not the most important thing, but my point is just that I genuinely believe that this company, from not just what games they've made, but how they've also treated their community, I genuinely feel like this company is gonna go far in a lot of areas, in a lot of places, and I feel like, you know, there should come a point where this company stops making gacha games and instead just goes out of the way to make, I don't know, indie or AAA games that aren't predatory, that are just games. And I feel like a lot of people will, across the board, I think a lot of people would genuinely love them. Now, whether or not they're like, you know, what exactly they do, I think that's up in the air, but all I will just say is, like, if they're gonna go down this route, I mean, play to your strengths. Because in my eyes, I just think, like, you know, you take what people like most about, you know, your game specifically, and then tap into that. You know, like, for example, Punishing Gray Raven. I love the combat of Punishing Gray Raven. And I love, like, the different characters and how they feel. You know, if they were to make a game where it's like you tap into that and really tap into sort of the core of the gameplay, I really feel like, well, personally, for people like me, you would have a game that genuinely would still be as loved, if not loved more, because it's not a gacha game, or not, because it's not a free-to-play live service title with microtransactions, right? I feel like you would have a game that's loved more and cherished more for that. But yeah, this is, I mean, if anything, like, that's, I think that's a good note to leave off on. So yeah, again, feel free to check out Punishing Gray Raven. It's available for Android, it's available for Apple, it's available for PC, and I know this isn't the episode I wanted to talk about it here, but if you wanted to check out Wuthering Waves, which is another Kuro game, it's available pretty much on the same stuff, and PS5, I guess, as well. But yeah. And also, I didn't mention this before, but yeah, I'm not actually sponsored by Kuro Games in any way, shape, or form to do this. I have not been paid, although I wish I was. I wish they would call me. Just saying. I would love to be sponsored by this company, honestly. It's not even like a joke. That's not even like, okay, it is a little dick sucking, all right? It is a little dick riding. I will say that. But look, I would just say if I got sponsored to like play either Wuthering Waves or Punishing Gray Raven, right? I wouldn't complain. But to quote Riley Freeman, I ain't on your nuts though. Yeah. Alright. But yeah. In the meantime, I'm gonna take off. I have Cara, I have Artstation, I have BlueSky. If you want to support me personally, ko-fi.com/theartsocialshow. If you want to see more of this podcast and whatnot, feel free to stick around to my YouTube channel and whatnot. I appreciate it. If you want to see me and my friends playing video games every now and then, you can go to twitch.tv/cafeautumn. And yeah, this has been the Sozo-sha with the Autumn Colors podcast, and I'm going to get out of here, and I hope to see you all next time, depending on whatever we talk about, because everything is uncertain until the future shows up, and then it is. But in the meantime, I'm going to take off. I hope all of you take care and have a good day, evening, whatever it is for you in your time zone. But I hope you all take care. Peace.